Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate the introduction. And I'm also very excited to kind of share my perspective on preprints from the point of view of a early career biomedical researcher. And I think Paula Stefan's keynote yesterday really set the stage very well for the kind of pressures that I think make preprints so appealing, particularly to younger scientists. So these panels that I'm about to show you come from a preprint, which was subsequently a paper in PNAS posted by Ron Vale, who's sort of the founder of ASAP Bio. And what he did was quantifying the number of panels in journals in cell biology over a 30-year period. And what I hope you can see is that from the 80s until today, there has been a huge increase in the amount of data that is required to effectively put together a publication. This is true not only for Cell, but also for Nature and for JCB as well. And at the same time, there's been a similar trend in the amount of time it takes graduate students at UCSF to put together their first author paper. So I actually did my PhD at UCSF. I promise I'm not that red dot at the top, but I can tell you that the production of this paper is a really kind of stressful situation. This paper, the first author paper, is the one that we'll be using to go out, look for fellowships, to go for a postdoc. And so it's incredibly important that our career is somewhat bottlenecked by these publications. And of course, I think the core reason for this, as Paula so elegantly stated, is that the act of sharing our work has mostly been tied to the evaluation of that work and career progression. So we're trying to get that work into high impact journals, et cetera, et cetera. So one solution to this challenge might be to create a little bit of space between the act of sharing and the act of evaluation. Which is, in effect, what I think a preprint can offer. So effectively, a preprint is, as I'm sure all of you know, in many cases the same version of manuscript that is submitted to a journal, but posted online so that the scientific community can react to it. And what we decided to do at this ASAP Bio meeting, which was co-organized by Ron, Harold Varamas, Daniel Colin Ramos, and myself, was to bring together different stakeholders to understand whether preprints could really play a role in the life sciences. And since that time, I think there's been a very positive response, not only from researchers, but also funders and journals as well. And so I'd like to share why biologists, I think, love preprints. And I should make the caveat here that preprinting in biology is still in its infancy, with approximately something like 1% of manuscripts that later will appear on PubMed are now being preprinted per month. Yet, almost everyone that I've spoken to has had an incredibly positive experience with this process for several reasons. So first, I think preprints are another way of gaining visibility. Just as scientists might go give a talk at a meeting or present a poster, a preprint can expose that work to others in the field so that they can read it and effectively become aware of what that researcher is doing. So here's a tweet from an early career researcher saying, I got a fellowship when this was my only publication. I started collaborations because of this. And furthermore, some editors are also using preprints as a way to scout work and invite work for submissions to journals. And this is something that I'm sure we'll hear more about from PLOS. And furthermore, preprints are a great way of demonstrating productivity for grants and jobs. So as I mentioned, especially in my own experience, there's never been a fellowship or position that I've applied to where I haven't been either struggling to put a paper together or to check to see if it was effectively submitted and published. So the fact that now some funding agencies are using preprints as a method for demonstrating productivity is very significant in terms of incentivizing their use. For example, the MRC, Wellcome Trust, HHMI, and NIH have all released policies that encourage the use of preprints in recent months. And actually, just a couple of days ago, Cancer Research UK also put out a statement encouraging the use as well. So I think that this acceptability of preprints as an evidence of productivity is going to really help their adoption. Furthermore, preprints help to create a record of what was done at what time. So, for example, this is photograph 51 from Franklin and Gosling. So, the story of how the structure of DNA was effectively solved has a lot of interesting twists and turns, and I think many researchers are concerned about how work that they're producing, perhaps in parallel with other labs, may be perceived. And I don't want to put too much emphasis on the concept of priority because I think that it is an oversimplified incentive that is perhaps not in the best interest of research productivity. But preprints allow researchers to have control over releasing work to the public eye. So there can be concerns that, I was speaking with someone yesterday who felt that peer reviewers may have been holding their work back unfairly during the review process. Preprints allow work to be surfaced to the community. And I think also very significant is this idea of getting more and better feedback, where with a paper being exposed publicly, researchers who have questions about how the work was done can call attention to that. So one can imagine, for example, the arsenic DNA paper. If that were released as a preprint, what would the final version of record have been like? Or, more innocently, I think that myself included among this number of researchers who've had positive experiences, feedback can just help strengthen a paper even before it ever gets to a journal. So I think that's also a very positive thing. And I think the most important benefit of preprints, something that an individual researcher can appreciate, but that is also very important, I think, to funders, is the idea that the faster that we can get information into the hands of our colleagues, the faster we can distribute this new discovery, the faster new work can build on top of it. And so, the generation of knowledge is really a collaborative endeavor, and it does no one any good to kind of hide our findings within our own lab. So one major benefit of preprints is the ability to accelerate discovery overall. So perhaps these are reasons why preprints in the life sciences are really expanding rapidly. So you can see here in this chart of preprints posted per month, there is kind of a steady rate of preprints appearing on arXiv in the quantitative biology section there. The explosive growth of bioRxiv in green, and also other communities that are using other servers as well, some of which are emerging into this space or coming into being for the first time. So Cielo has not yet launched, but I think that there's going to be a broad contribution towards preprints in biology from different entities. So you may be thinking, well, that's all well and good, but I have concerns, and certainly I think researchers also do too. So let me share some of those with you, sort of in the order at which I hear them. From the young scientists, I think the number one fear is about getting scooped. So this is a word cloud. I polled an audience. I gave a talk to some postdocs and had them put in, submit some words. And by far, the biggest concern when I asked them, what are your concerns about preprints, is scooping. So they're concerned that this work will expose their efforts to someone else who can take advantage of it, but not appropriately credit them. In physics, where preprinting has existed and is really the norm and has been for a quarter of a century, this is really not a problem. From the perspective of Polka and Sparg, the preprint itself is insurance against scooping because it is a public disclosure that everyone is aware of. So I think this concern is heavily dependent upon the social dynamics of who's looking at preprints. A second concern is that we can't be trusted to share our work before peer review, that somehow we're going to be flooding preprint servers with a bunch of garbage. I think that the fact that arXiv has over 1 million manuscripts and that it is really a very respected form of communication in many disciplines is strong evidence against this. And also, it's not only arXiv, but also SSRN and other repositories as well. So we also have a lot of precedent in the fact that we present unpublished data to one another all the time in the form of poster sessions and talks at meetings. But we are sort of reluctant, I think, to give a really poor presentation there because our reputation is attached to it. So I think that this will be a disincentive toward abusing the preprint space in a similar fashion. A third concern is that preprints and journals are not compatible, that somehow this will be very disruptive to our process of sharing information. But this has not been the case in the world of the arXiv. So this is a study of the percentage of arXiv papers that subsequently appear can be matched to a Web of Science publication. And except for the papers that get close to the publication date of this article, this fraction remains very high. But I should say that I think the idea that preprint servers could accommodate some work that may not appear in a journal is actually very exciting. Right now, I think this relates heavily to concepts of replication and reproducibility. Work that may not be exciting or that may present a high barrier to publication could be released in a format like this. A fourth concern is that journals won't accept preprints. This is an author concern, but in fact, so many journals have really changed their policies over the last few years in the life sciences that it's really exciting and something that can be easily looked up either on an incomplete Wikipedia list that's very easy to use or, of course, on Sherpa Romeo. A fifth concern is this idea that preprints are going to expose information to the general public that is dangerous. And I think this is a very legitimate concern in the sense that there is an opportunity for journalists or the public to interpret science, all science, not just preprints, in a way that is perhaps misleading. So I think one example of a paper on bioRxiv that got a lot of media attention was this paper about cell phones and cancer. And so I have learned that this was actually a gesture of transparency from the researchers. And I think given that some of this information had been leaking early on, and I think one thing that is incredibly helpful in this situation is the fact that on bioRxiv and PeerJ preprints as well, there is sort of a little warning, a disclaimer. Buyer beware, this is a preprint, and that's what a preprint means, which I think is incredibly important. Transparency about the peer review status of these manuscripts is essential. That's not to say that the public can also be misled by papers that somehow make it through a peer review process. So I think that this is a general problem about how media interpret science in general. I think the question of how do we release information that is not damaging to subject participants, et cetera, is also very important and related. So, for example, there was a case of a researcher posting a bunch of OkCupid profiles data to a data repository, which clearly is, from one perspective, a rich data source, from another perspective, a leak of private information. So I think it's really important that preprint servers, as they do now, adhere to screening standards and that they are kind of monitored by members of the community as a standard practice. So I want to end on a concern that I think there's been a little bit more conversation about this in the biomedical space recently, which is about how preprints should be cited, or if they should be cited at all. So here is a researcher basically saying that he thinks that unpeer-reviewed documents should not be allowed to be cited in journal articles. And I know that there are different policies surrounding this. And a lively debate has ensued, with others making the point that a citation is not necessarily a certification of value of an object, but rather a pointer to that information. I think the more serious concern here is that this relates back to the concern about scooping. If I read a preprint that's highly relevant to my own work, I learn how to do a method from a preprint, and journal policy prohibits me from citing that preprint, then I'm effectively being forced to plagiarize work. And so I think that this is something that I hope we can discuss further, and I think it's very important in order to be able to enable a coherent and intact scholarly record. So I want to thank our board of directors and also encourage you to visit our website, and please email me if you have any questions. Thank you so much.